How does one end anxiety? I don't know.
You just tell it to stop.
Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Balanced and Bougie. We're so thankful that you're here with us today. And today we're going to talk about something everyone loves so much, anxiety. I do need to preface that while we're talking about anxiety, we are not doctors, we're not therapists, we are not giving medical advice or trying to tell you anything to do in replacement of the plans you have made with your doctor or your therapist. We're just speaking in like the most basic terms of the fact that everyone in the world experiences anxiety to some extent. And today we are just going to talk about some of the things that we have found to be successful when dealing with that, basic anxiety that everyone feels due to situation or hormones or just that period of time.
Yeah, neither Eric or I have been diagnosed with any like chronic anxiety, so it is more situational and or that hormonal one, man, it can hit like a train. And
Absolutely.
I'm laughing about it because that's also me processing that I just went through a whole weekend of being like, am I okay? Like, my mind is not a space I want to live in right now. And it got really scary and I was really sad and like so many tears and like talking to people. And then, guys, I got my period and I'm like, now I'm just angry at everyone because like that's the natural process of menstruation for me and the world seemingly loves to align. But for a while there, it's like I had to use some of the tools in the toolbox because it's debilitating, even if it's not chronic.
And it's almost funny in the fact that, not to be like TMI guys, but both Brooke and I kind of like synced up. So when we were talking about episodes for, this week to record, we were like, it's been a really anxiety-ridden week or so. So let's dive in there because absolutely I've noticed that when I'm in those couple days before I get my period, my anxiety, I it just gets out of hand. The other day I was sitting there with my husband and he was like, "What's wrong?" Because I don't know, I was sitting there like very tense and I was like, "I have no idea, but I'm incredibly anxious about everything that's ever happened to me."
Yes. Yes. Or for me, I know I recently fell into like, I describe it as this leading up to my period specifically. It was like this overwhelming kind of disorienting cloud of heaviness with acute spikes of extreme overwhelm or fear of things that are like mine was more future, but just hasn't happened yet. And I could come back to being like I have no basis for this, like this it wasn't a logical thing. It felt just as real, if not more. So you're not crazy, guys. We should know
No.
that by now because anxiety is so mainstream, but like sometimes you're like, what's wrong? Like, am I ever going to get out of this? You will. And there's tools in the meantime, hopefully, that can either help get you there or can help minimize these feelings.
I I do think that that's like such an interesting perspective that as we're both thinking about our anxiety, it is presenting in very different ways, and that's something that everyone's going to notice is that each person is experiencing a very different version of when your heart starts beating really fast and when you feel out of control. A lot of my anxiety is based around fear of like repercussions for things that have already happened. I just
Oh
like
my
replay
gosh.
things I've done quote unquote wrong and how that's going to affect me for the rest of my life. Specifically, like last week, I was thinking about an altercation I had with a friend, I'd say 7 years ago. And I was just thinking about how like that might affect me this week. Like that might come back to be a really big problem for me. If it hasn't been a problem for 7 years, I'm not sure why it suddenly was a problem. So I guess I am also kind of thinking I'm anxious about the future, but I do notice like the root of my anxiety coming from like regret, or I almost even gaslight myself into thinking that I handled it worse than I did. 'Cause I'll end up talking to somebody and they'll be like, "You, that was not as big a deal as you think it was." But it is something that I think we will go through periods of these anxiety for forever. And so we have to kind of get tools in our toolbox to not let it ruin our lives and to kind of prevent it from becoming a cycle. Because I definitely
Yeah.
see how I could be stuck in this cycle of anxiety every single month. And then that could become every week I have a series of anxiety. And then every single day I could be anxious. So here, today we're going to talk about some of the things we do both to prevent anxiety and to kind of deal with anxiety when it's already popping up.
So maybe let's start with prevention. Day to day, Erica, what do you notice helps take away maybe a little bit of that general anxiety from popping up or hanging around?
So I think we talked about it in a recent podcast episode, or at least maybe I just mentioned it to you in person. That's one of the side effects of talking on the phone a lot, as I
Yeah,
can't always remember what we said recorded and what we said on our own.
so
But
true.
one of the big shifts I had to make recently was I am not allowing myself to scroll on any short form content in the evening ever. I feel like I think maybe in general at night, my mind might just be a little bit more susceptible to negative thoughts. And because those algorithms want to feed you content you're going to keep engaging with, I started to notice that at night I would start seeing negative things about, people, the world. I just kept getting fed things that upset me, made me sad, made me feel hopeless about the world. And all I'm trying to do is go to bed. And I have really found that taking those short form content away from myself, and I'm really only allowed to read. I'm saying allowed. These are my choices that I've made, but I do feel like I've set a rule for myself. But taking away that short form content, I have noticed keeps me from getting heightened at night, and then preventing me from sleeping or causing me to have nightmares, which then make my whole next day garbage.
Yeah, that stimuli, right? Like there's so much about it, in addition to a lot of media just being throwing something interesting to have you grasp on it. And it's actually a little bit of like, it's going to raise your stress level. And then, yeah, trying to fall asleep, it's not conducive. Similarly for me at night, I do really try to not be on my phone like an hour before bed. I consider myself to be very sensitive to like caffeine and lack of sleep and things. Like seriously, one off night of sleep, I feel very, very anxious. Like I can just feel it in my entire body and caffeine doesn't sit right. So sometimes, and I love coffee, but I really do try to cut it off by like 2, if not 3 o'clock. Maybe if it's a cup of tea, it's like I'll push it to 3. And some of that is for general sleep health, but I also noticed it's so funny, you guys, because it's like, let's say I'm like, oh, it's not going to affect me. It's fine. I'll still get tired. And I do. I'm tired by 9:30. As soon as my head hits the pillow, it's just like waves of past trauma, fears, scenarios. Did I lock my garage door? Like, do I have to buy a lawnmower? Like, and I really do. Some of that, it is the stereotypical joke that's just when anxiety arrives. But I notice it less when I really monitor my caffeine and my sugar before bed because I'm sensitive to it. I always have been.
I definitely think that that's an incredibly important area to like look at into the things you're bringing into your body. One of the things that I wrote down that I was like is actually a total zero never for me is I'm not ever going to have an energy drink ever again for the rest of my life. I love coffee, and Brooke knows this. I am a big fan of the 2 p.m. coffee too, and I still have caffeine. Probably not after 4, but I feel like I tolerate it pretty well. But the moment that I, for some reason, am ingesting a Rockstar or a Monster or whatever else it is, I notice that I will just spend the rest of the day like feeling different than I normally do. And I definitely have found the correlation between that and then inevitably crashing or having anxiety or distressing thoughts pretty much every time. So I'm not saying nobody should have caffeine or should have energy drinks, but it's definitely one of those things where we need to monitor ourselves and kind of keep track of the reactions our bodies are having to the stimuli we're introducing it to.
Yeah, totally. I have 1 cup of coffee and it's really strong because I love the taste of it, all those things. And there are certain days where I'm sitting and I'm working and I can just, that same sort of anxiety rises. And I have been able to tie it back to like, that coffee's really hitting today, right? Or I need to get up and move, or like, okay, this lunch break, I'm going to move and get that out. Because while it can sometimes just be energy, I've noticed that energy also then turns into ruminating thoughts, mindsets, just like general angst, if you will. So even during the day it can hit. So like just yeah, being mindful of caffeine, different types of caffeine, or even different foods, because I live in the camp of believing that some of this is like when your body is inflamed for whatever reason, right? Like, or if there's an abnormal amount of inflammation in your body, like they say there's actually a nerve or like some sort of path from your gut up to a certain part of your brain that senses, like, are things off, are things not? So just paying attention, I think, first and foremost, like we talk about on here a lot, is to your sleep, to your diet, and any specific triggers, which, yeah, might not be all caffeine, but it might be certain types.
The things that we eat also has the same like level of impact, and I can definitely feel, I know from our personal conversations that you also feel that way, that food is kind of the root of all of our successes and our downfalls. Right. I also know, like, there are certain foods I avoid. I don't believe in cutting out all foods always, but I avoid high grease and fast food. I find that they sit poorly in my body, and then I do see that the rest of the day I might feel sluggish, and then that sluggish feeling does very quickly slide into things aren't going well for me. I'm feeling sluggish, so things are bad, or I must not be doing a good job at work, or I'm not energetic enough to hang out with my friends, or I'm just kind of feeling lower. So I've really noticed that what I'm eating matters. But on the flip side of that coin, I still really do believe in comfort food, which I know is a bit of I'm talking about a solution for in the moment, but I do believe in the power of like food to make you feel better. So when I am having a day where I'm feeling really emotional or feeling a lot of anxiety about like what's going on in the world, I will go to one of my more comfortable meals. I've just found that if I kind of cheat around the meal to make sure that I'm not making it worse. So when I know I want something like heavier, like a pasta or a macaroni and cheese, I add veggies to it so that I know that it's not going to have such an intense impact on my digestive system and therefore make my situation feel worse. It kind of benefits me, and I don't have those internal self thoughts that are negative because I am societally conditioned. I also, societally conditioned to feel like guilty over eating something, right? Mm-hmm. And then also I know that I am getting the nutrition that helps my brain function better, and I'm still getting that comfort food that's, reminding me of feeling safe, feeling satiated, so I'm not thinking about my next meal, feeling more anxious. And I do that same thing with things like pizza. I can make that at home. I can make it super filling. I can make it have all that nutrition, and then I'm still getting that kind of maybe feeling like when you're a little kid and you ate something and it made you feel good. I think it's kind of emulating that same feeling.
Yeah.
Have you noticed similar things like that for yourself with food?
I definitely do. Yeah. Like, even as you were saying that, I really think about how, yeah, food can kind of transport you back to things or just kind of remind you of happy, fuzzy memories. It can even kind of fall into that gratitude category. So I definitely, too, I will crave, yeah, like carbs or something just like heavy and warm, just almost like a mom's homemade casserole sort of thing. But yeah, like still fueling your body correctly. Because I feel like there's a difference between, this is not a tangent I'm going to follow, but when I'm more in just like a heavy, what I would consider more of like leaning towards like a depressive state, I want like sugar, things that are going to pick me up, are going to make me feel like a joy sort of response. Where when I'm anxious, I'm like, I just want something that is going to like put my feet on the ground. And I do think some of those comfort meals, it just like, it does that. Maybe it's because you enjoy it so much, it actually brings your attention to the moment. I don't know what it is, but it works.
I think you explained it perfectly. I think like I'm wanting to be not held down, but almost, it's like that food feels like a hug. And I think it's super important to sometimes make sure that you are, giving that to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, because food is fuel, it's medicine, but it also can be fun. It can be comfort, those different things. The other thing I think on this tangent of prevention, which is I try to make more of a regular practice, is movement. And of course, I think we all have our workouts or our structures or our sports that we like to keep up with. But also, if my body feels heavy and it's like, I know I shouldn't push myself, I don't have to go to the gym. Like sometimes when I'm inside and I'm spiraling and I don't want to leave the couch because everything just like feels scary or big, I force myself to do any sort of basic movement. Like get outside is best if you can. Like walk. I don't care how slow. I don't care if it's 10 minutes, 15. Like it 9 times out of 10 is a game changer. Or even just like doing yoga or like breathing, like moving myself from that physical space that I'm in, no matter how like weirdly comforting it can feel. When I'm locked in a bad headspace, I'm like, my environment needs to change now. Even if I go walk around the grocery store, and do you know where I don't want to be? The grocery store. But movement, however you can, I think that goes hand in hand with environment change as well. So I guess some of that falls into like dealing with it in the moment, but prevention as in like I know if I've sat at my computer all day, I'm like I need to walk before bed because it will hit me. I will be like I'm going to be fine. It'll be 10:30 at night. And I'll be like, "Well, now I can't go for a walk."
Absolutely. I actually, I'm seeing like a connection directly between, what you're saying about making sure you have movement and even thinking back to kind of the caffeine or even just like the, in general, like your heart rate is increased when you're anxious. That,
Mm-hmm.
you know, a lot of our jobs, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners' jobs are pretty sedentary, right? Like when I'm working, I'm sitting down at my computer and I mean, sometimes I might choose to have a standing desk or I have a desk where I can pedal while I work, but it's not a lot of movement. And I think like our bodies are definitely made to be moving and they seek that movement. And so when you have that excess energy that has not yet turned into anxiety, it's really good to make sure that you're giving yourself an outlet for that energy. It's good for your body, it's good for your brain, all of those things. But there's definitely got to be a connection between that energy being unused and then
Mm-hmm.
shifting into that kind of ball of anxiety that starts building in your chest throughout the day.
Yeah. That's such a good example too, because I personally, and I think I've talked about it, I've become a lunchtime workout person, having a sit at a computer job. And I on days where it hasn't turned from, it goes from coffee to heart rate raising, but it hasn't like reached my brain to be anxiety yet. I will sometimes, I'll say to coworkers, other people, I'm like, I gotta go work out, otherwise I'm gonna lose my mind. And it comes as this like, yeah, just this raising energy even before it becomes a bad thing. Like I can tell I'm just like, get me out of this seat. And that really is just that you need to process it. Otherwise, it can. And I know sometimes we don't always have that option. But again, even if it's getting up, walking away from your desk, you can do like air squats in the room. We're not meant to sit at computers. I think it is, sitting is the new smoking. It's slowly killing us. And I think this is one of the ways, is it just works up the body. And a good way to negate it is just to, yeah, get outside. Maybe like step on the grass. I don't know. That too, sunlight.
I mean, think about when we were kids, right? Like we had
Yeah.
recess at school.
Hmm.
And if you can remember, I remember, I think pretty vividly because I did teach as an adult, but if we all like sit and think back to when we were little and we were in school and it was indoor recess. So all you could do, which was cool sometimes, but all you could do was like play a board game or talk to your friends and you're like in the classroom sitting down. You're not running. You're not out there expending energy in some way. 9 times out of 10, some kid is gonna lose their crap that day. Because,
Meltdown. Yeah.
yes,
Teachers hate indoor recess for that very reason. The energy
exactly.
never comes down in the room. It only builds until
And
Jimmy
we,
loses his shit.
exactly. And the thing
Yeah.
is, yeah, we may be adults now, but that is like human functioning. And we should, it's
Yeah.
important that as adults we learn how to, self-regulate and find other outlets and all of that. But why would that need for expending energy go away as we get older?
Right.
If anything, it should be even more important as we get older.
That's so true. Oh my gosh. And I even think about too, like as an adult, and adults older than me, I'm like, oh, I don't have the energy for that anymore and stuff. And okay, there are days where you're running like crazy, you're doing all the things. But you notice how too, by the end of the day, you can just feel like a zombie if you've sat all day and you've pushed that energy down because the body is going to be like, okay, fine. We got to keep this person alive. But yeah, if you don't get it out, it can turn into anxiety or it can turn into like this grogginess when you're like, well, I haven't done anything. Why am I tired? Because that energy is like this cycle that keeps you going. So yeah, I love that comparison. We don't lose that as we become adults. There's no way we do. It just gets rewired to different things, or we just teach ourselves to not honor that, which is a shame.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note like that movement can look like whatever you want it to, like whatever
Yeah.
works for your body. Obviously, I know a lot of times when, if you're listening to this podcast and you're listening to Brooke and I talk, a lot of the movement that we're engaging in is more like vigorous gym-based exercise or, weight-bearing exercise. It doesn't have to be.
Mm-hmm.
If I've found a lot of my old coworkers really benefited from going on a walk around the building during lunch. And it was like leisurely. They would talk. Sometimes they would talk to each other. Sometimes they would listen to an audiobook. I know one person like calls their spouse when they're on their lunch break and they just walk. And just, I think any form of movement to whatever degree your body can handle or is comfortable with and works within the confines of obviously whatever your job permits, it's not going to hurt. It's going to help. And I think those things are just so important to kind of giving you a solid baseline to prevent that anxiety from boiling over, especially anxiety that's not based in a particular issue. Really just that
Right.
generic, like, why am I feeling this way anxiety?
Absolutely. Yeah. Not situationally triggered for like a short amount of time, right? Because anxiety is a human response that keeps us alive, and it's meant to like you hear an animal that is going to threaten you because you're living outside. Like we're looking at an evolutionary perspective. You're going to go up, but we were meant to have this anxious response to acute threats for short periods of time. And now, because of stimuli, lack of movement, all those things, it's becoming prolonged. And that's where then it can start to feel very like disorienting. So, yeah, having a basis, however you can, to prevent the onset, and that figuring out what that's going to be might take logging for a while, paying attention. What are your triggers? What time of day does it come up? Does that follow anything? And noticing. And then, yeah, implementing these things for general well being.
What is your one of your go-to in the moment solutions for anxiety?
I think my biggest one, if I can, which I kind of already said, but it really does come in handy in the moment too, is like changing my environment if I can. Because I notice in a lot of those times when, again, I'm reflecting on hormonal changes, I'm like, I just want to sit in my house and I'm just going to stay here and I want to isolate because sometimes solitude is good, but I personally reach a point of so much solitude that I'm like, I've been in my mind for 2.5 hours. Maybe we need to change this up. So changing that environment usually means trying to be outside, but really it can be anything, especially when I feel like, oh, it's the last thing I want to do is leave this spot. That's when I know I have to go. So that at least helps get me out of the depths in the moment. How about you?
Yeah, building on that, I think we really should emphasize the importance of getting outside. We can even think to, I'm looking to kids and infants a lot in this episode, thinking about how we help them regulate themselves. We can use those same tools to regulate ourselves as adults and to help ourselves. If you have a baby who's crying all day, take them outside. They will likely prefer it. And so we need to do the same thing to ourselves. We are still animals, right? Like human beings we're mammals, we're animals. We are supposed to be connected with nature. And while I'm thankful for my house and there being heat and AC and all of those things, we should be getting outside when at all possible. And that, devastating to tell you guys, even means when it's cold and gross
Ugh,
outside.
I know.
It's still so important to spend some time outside. And if for, some reason you can't physically get outside because of the weather or because of other obstacles, looking out your windows, opening your windows, having some sort of connection to the outside, I think is incredibly grounding. If you could get outside and take your shoes off, that's even more grounding. There's lots of people who talk about that. I think that there's an epidemic of anxiety in our culture, in our world, and I really do. My personal belief is a lot of that and a lot of our other icky struggles with mental health have developed from our disconnect to our roots, our core of being part of nature. And I think whether you know it or not, we actually yearn to be outside and connected to that.
We do, yes. Let's say it's even like a crummy day, but getting outside, you're still gonna get light in your eyes, you're getting fresh air, you're in like kind of the energy of nature around you if you be near like a tree or grass or take a walk in a park. And it is this perfect mix of that environment, but also, and I've heard this explained, like changing the stimuli around your body can also either help ground you or pull you. So like let's say it's cold outside and it's like you going from being toasty and warm to being cold for a second will kind of shift your system, and it might just shut off that thinking, like it's going to jam something in the cog that just keeps running, right? Like I'm thinking about rumination specifically. Or if you really can't get outside, like take a shower, take a hot shower or a cold blast. Like anything that is going to change the state you're in physically is a great place to start. And while I think exerting energy is like my second level of that, like any sort of energy exertion, and if I have to stay inside because it's, just I can't be outside, like moving, dancing sometimes, like just moving that energy. But yeah, I that's another thing I think that comes with the sunlight and all of that stuff is like then you'll start to notice like, oh, I'm warm or I'm a little chilly. Like you're actually paying attention to what's around you instead of staying in your sterile box.
I feel the need to like triple, double emphasize the take a shower. Anxiety can lead to depression. I know that that's getting into a little bit more of like the medical like condition side of things, but you know, to prevent from getting there, taking a shower is so helpful to kind of end one segment of the day that you're in and begin another one. It refreshes you. But if you're really struggling, if you're like you're noticing, oh my gosh, my thought patterns are ruminating on these very negative things, and I'm getting concerned about my thoughts and behaviors, freeze yourself, splash yourself with that cold water. You will be shocked how much of an impact that cold water splash can have. If you can't take a shower, I used to do this all the time in college. I would just get the water as cold as I could in the sink and then splash my face like a few times, and it actually was very helpful. I'm sure there's probably even science to that. I don't know it, but like I'm very confident and I keep that in my back pocket at all times.
Hit us with one of yours, like in the moment, what's something you do?
I'm going to build all again. I'm building on it. Our lists are too similar. We need to spend some time apart.
We are one.
But I know that you'll probably go in a bit more to like physical activity, or we talked about that for prevention. But my number one like tip for dealing with anxiety, and I'm sure I've already told the podcast and I tell everyone I can all the time, is if you notice your heart rate is high, which I do, I wear my Apple Watch, I can check it, you can feel it, you know, all of those things. When your heart rate is getting high, especially if you don't know why, if you get your body moving, I usually just go take a walk on a high incline on a treadmill or something, and I try to bring my body's level of movement up to the heart rate that I am having. So if my heart rate is at like 134, I try to get to that level of physical activity that would get my body to 134 normally, and then I can slow down. And oftentimes I have found really great success with entering into the exercise, coming out of it, reducing my heart rate back down to a level playing field, and then my brain is no longer trying to figure out why I'm anxious, and therefore offering me reasons to be anxious, thus
Yes.
creating a cycle of anxiety. And that is my go-to. I probably get myself moving, walking to deal with increased heart rate a couple times every other week. Like, it is a very regular part of coping for me.
Yeah. My nerd brain wants to jump on that a little bit. Like some of that is like this can fall into the prevention category because you do like if you get your heart rate up or you do exercises that again, leisurely walking and those things are great. Yoga is great for like bringing yourself down into your parasympathetic nervous system that we don't tap into a lot with constant stimulation in our world. But on the flip side, strength training or getting into zone 2 or like getting your heart rate up, putting those stressors on your body and your body adapts, you then adapt better in moments like this. So it's really interesting how you've noticed that explicitly because I too, if it's a particularly stressful moment or something, I notice I want to push more weight or that helps ground me into the earth. Like I want something heavy that I have to push against and that just takes some of that away. Or I find an outlet, like preferably my bike, where I can just haul it until I'm like breathing really heavily. And I know some of that too is oxygenating your system. That also is a really big help too. But yeah, totally getting up to that heart rate point where you're so tired and then it just, I'm almost acting like us and our heart rate is different, but I feel like you come down with it. Raising your body to meet it. It's such a good tool. If these other little ones, like, okay, just getting outside isn't doing it, run. I don't care if you're not a runner, like run, do push-ups, burpees, and do it for a little longer than you want until you're really gassed. And oh, it's such a relief. It's like a really beautiful moment to have. And this is maybe TMI, but I also sometimes like that might be the threshold. I get my heart rate up, and if I'm still like thinking, I'm like, then I cry. And that's almost the final wave of like, we're here. We're processing it now. Like it's to the surface and we can do something because crying apparently releases serotonin in your brain. So I always feel better after a cry.
Well, that is also like
we love crying.
Psychologically, factually helpful, right? And that's, I get so excited about this stuff. I think about, again, I'm going to tie it back to kids because that is, I think that we're all just kids. Like we're all just large versions of children sometimes. I mean, not really, right? But like
We totally are,
we
though.
to some extent, there's a lot of similarities. So there's this
Yeah.
chart for when you're dealing with dysregulation in a child, and it kind of goes from like they're at their regular state. It's a diamond, and so we're at the bottom of the diamond. They're at their regular state. When we get up to this first corner, that's where a kid is starting to kind of test the boundaries, or they're starting to show their agitation. They are verbalizing their agitation, and you can think back to yourself, like as an adult who's probably by themselves while this is happening. This is the point where you're ruminating, you're getting frustrated, but like you're not totally off yet. When you go up to the top, that's where a child who's dysregulated or struggling with some stronger issues might have, like a large behavior where they chuck a chair at somebody or scream and rip up a paper, I don't know. And you as an adult who is capable of handling big feelings, that's where you might yell, you might get really frustrated, you're just like completely freaking out. That's up here. But once you start coming back down, that's when you cry. That's when the kid cries, that's when you cry. And that is kind of pulling us all back down. This is an important step to release. If you don't hit the crying come down part, you're actually probably still up here. This is like the crying, the breakdown, the release of emotions is so important to ending that circle. And after that is when after you're done with the crying is when you can kind of return back to like, I am regulated. Our bodies have these reactions to help us. Crying is
That
good.
is so cool. It makes so much sense because sometimes I just almost wish I could get to the point of crying. But you almost have to like, it has to peak. And maybe it sounds to me like you can do that in a way of maybe doing this thing where your heart rate or your activity or exertion level meets the level of your heart rate to just kind of trigger your body into this, maybe without a full-fledged panic attack coming along with it.
Right.
Like,
We don't want to
but
be
if that's what it has to be, yeah, just how can you get to the top and like not harm yourself or others? And I don't mean that in an extreme, maybe in an extreme way, but also just like not throwing a
And like
table.
that baseline too, right? I
Yeah.
totally agree. And it does bring me to one of the things that I wrote down that I would kind of help get us from, point A to point B where you can maybe have that emotional reaction. And that is music. I truly believe that music has power. And when I am anxious, there is one of two ways I want to go with music. I either want to go to like really high speed, like pumped up music and kind of like get excited or whatever, Charlie XCX or whatever music you like to dance to, because there is so much evidence that dancing is like the most effective form of like antidepressant in the world. But if that's not going to work for you because you're like, I hate fun and happiness, because I reached that with anxiety where I'm like, I want nothing to do with good. I have a sad playlist, and then I'll listen to sad music and I will induce crying. Like I will just get myself and I'll let myself get to that I won't get myself to that sad place, but I kind of like allow myself to, through other people's music, through other people's creativity, or maybe a movie would work for somebody, to have that release of those emotions, cry, let those, crying, I think, releases endorphins into your body, let all of those things process through you, and then you're kind of like, okay, well, I did that, and now I'm ready to move on.
Yeah, totally. There's really beneficial things, like journaling and talking to a friend, and those can like help in those moments too. But I think there really is something that if you can have some sort of catalyst to this energy, like moving through that like top of the diamond or like getting to there, like peaking in a way. And some of it is. It could, like, another thing that comes to mind is having a conversation with someone. Because, you guys, when someone's just like, are you okay? And then you're like, no! Like, it's the simplest question. Or you might say something to yourself 7 times, but then actually admitting it to a friend or talking about it with someone, I don't know, it makes it tangible in a way that has also induced tears for me, right? Or has, like, brought that to a head in the way it needs to.
I totally agree. I wrote down like calling a friend or a parent or a relative, somebody in your life who can validate you, but I also note like that they can check you, because it's important that that person that you're talking to is kind of able to be like a reality check for you when you might need it. Because we all ruminate, we all like cycle on something, and you might need your friend to be able to be like, hey, That's valid. I totally get that you feel this way. However, you are living in an alternate universe right now, and that's
Yeah.
not how everyone else sees the situation you're in. And I love you, but this is what everyone sees. And that can kind of sometimes help you reorient to life when your anxiety is telling you how things are.
Having someone that can listen is amazing. But yeah, someone who could actually reflect the real. Because it's, Eric, I'm going back to like how we talk so much. We've talked about our anxiety, but the way you explained it, I'm like, oh my gosh, here I thought my anxiety was uniquely my own. But mine too often has to do with I hyperfixate on one thing that I did that like is going to project some sort of horrible thing into my future. That was like the root of my most recent like anxiety, pop-ups, and it's in different realms. But so like to some extent too, I think talking to someone else, not only they help you ground into the actual reality, but also you can find similarities too, and that sometimes, at least for me, releases the like, am I going to be here forever? Am I alone? Because that's another, I'm sure we all feel this way, but like in these states, you could have just like hugged your friend and walked out the door, and then you like an hour later are like in an anxious state, and you're like, nobody loves me, nobody cares about me. It's just like, even
Yeah.
if I have no one to call, I promise that's not true. I promise it feels real, but I promise it's not true. So call your friends, because even sometimes I'm like, I'm being a downer. My friends are like, I don't care. Like, I love you. And I would do the same for my friends. I would never, if someone called me because they're anxious, I'd be like, let's freaking talk. So do it. Friends are amazing.
It's almost an honor when one of your friends, I think, reaches out to you for support, or at least that's how I interpret it. When somebody calls me and is like, I just need to get this off my chest, or I just need to talk through it, I feel really validated in my friendships. I feel like I'm helping them. And while it's important to make sure that you're not like only calling somebody to complain to them, and you're never sharing positives with them, and you're never checking in with them, I promise that if somebody's friends with you, they want to hear about what you're struggling with and help you get to the other side of it, just as you would do for them. So one of the more like maybe silly seeming, or that might not work for everybody, is definitely like a sensory input kind of calming event for me. Some people might use like a fidget or like a squishy. I have no idea. But I personally have found extreme soothing from blankets that have ribbon around the outside of the blanket. And then that ribbon can be like rubbed between my hand or my fingers. I find that more soothing than anything else in the world. I think I've been doing it since I was a literal like 2-year-old. So it's definitely like calling back to self-soothing as a little kid. But as an adult, I'm having a really hard day or something has upset me. I will pull out my blanket on the couch and I will like sit with it up here by my face, and I will just rub they were called feelies in my household. Apparently that's not a real name, but you were feeling them,
Never
so
heard of it,
feelies.
but it's so cute.
Yeah. But like rubbing the ribbons, I truly find that to be like, that is my last line of defense. I find it to work in a variety of ways. I also definitely do it to help myself fall asleep. When I'm feeling upset, it is my go-to, my number one. I actually collect these blankets because I'm so scared of not having access to them anymore, because like they don't make them anymore. They're like old and people think they're scratchy and they hate them. I don't hate them. Or they're baby blankets. Like when you go to Walmart or Target or whatever and you see the baby section, they've got the soft blanket with the ribbon around it. I need that, but for my entire body. I just love it. I find that to be important, and I think that sensory processing part of us matters. We all have sensory needs. We all have sensory sensitivities, and that is a side of ourselves that I think we ignore some when it comes to all the stimuli we're constantly taking in, that there may be stimuli we need to do to bring us back down.
It's not silly at all. It's a very specific thing that you found. And it's always so interesting when we go into this for ourselves and do a little investigation, like what your unique thing is going to be. Because you might have something like Erica that is very specific to you, whether it's a physical grounding, or we've talked a lot about energy exertion, but maybe it's something that actually is more of can actually bring your heart rate down instead of trying to send it up to, meet that.
I definitely think it's something worth exploring, and I think these are things that can be enjoyable, because it may be that you have a specific candle that you light in a specific room that you're sitting in and you're kind of closing your eyes and just seeing what that smell is. Or you could find that you have a certain white noise or a brown noise that you play in the background that kind of helps bring everything level. Because while I totally agree that like exertion often is one of the most important ways for me personally to deal with anxiety, I think a lot of that stems from the fact that my job isn't very physical and that I could always probably exert a little bit more. But there are probably people who are running around all day long. Like they're constantly
Right.
moving. They have a very physical job where maybe they need to be focusing on, I'm going to sit and let my body fully calm back down and kind of figure out which one of their senses we need to tap into to reach that.
Yeah, definitely. Because I know a big tool for a lot of anxiety too is like meditation, right? Like breath work, guided meditations, taking deep breaths. Because a lot of times when we are anxious, it's very shallow breathing. And I think it has something to do with just getting more oxygen into your brain. Like taking those deep breaths helps on that level. So, totally. In addition to the things to kind of bring yourself up, you can tell when it's like, no, I just can't move. I need to relax. And that's when you can fall into these, yeah, like physical touch or grounding points. A personal one I sometimes fall into as well is stand-up comedy. I'll just look things up. If I know I have someone who I really enjoy listening to and I haven't overly heard the bit too much, or while scrolling social media is not great, like I do save things that make me laugh. And sometimes I will, like, especially when I'm like, nothing is good in the world, I go back and some video of a baby makes me laugh. It's what I needed. I don't know. So that I feel like is my blanket equivalent is
Yes.
looking up like old stand-up things from specific comedians or just going into the saved file in my Instagram of laughs and rewatching videos that for whatever reason I bust a gut every time.
I think there's huge value to those things that remind you that there is good and also just kind of maybe snaps you out of it. Like if you're able to listen to something and you get a really gut laugh, probably some of that is your breathing. So I think we're tying back, right? You're taking a deep breath in to
True.
take a deep breath out. But just having that positive input into your brain in a world where a lot of the time social media and all these things, which I use, obviously I'm on there, I'm posting all the time, right, is feeding us less positive things. If we can focus in on the things that bring us joy, make us happy to be alive, that is definitely going to help snap us out of those anxiety spirals.
Totally. There's one other thing that I wanted to bring up because it is in that podcast I referenced earlier. And it was a strategy that I think is really interesting that I'm starting to play with. I don't have all of my research yet, guys. I'll report back if we ever do a follow up on this. But there's a Harvard professor, I'm forgetting his name, but we'll link it, who in this episode that talks about like relationships and all these things, he does talk about anxiety and like general anxiety. And I feel like what I have been talking about so far in this podcast are those really heavy acute, just or like even acute over a couple of days. But if you're noticing that like the rumination and things are extending and it's almost a level of anxiety that maybe it's not sending you to like the I can't function threshold, I need to kind of go through the diamond and let this out, but it's more so like what is it he has you go through a step of like moving things from your subconscious into the conscious mind and really digging down to like the why. And so like thinking, okay, what am I afraid of in this moment? This fear that is not necessarily here. Okay, because what would that mean? Like it would kill me. Okay, like is it actually going to kill you like dead?
Yeah.
Or is it going to kill you like it will bring you immense amounts of shame? Oh, it's immense amounts of shame. Well, why does that feel like death? Like you're thinking about that, but also he actually takes you through steps where he's like, imagine the worst case scenario. That's what this real strategy is. So he's like, walk to that fear. Like if it's a general fear anxiety, he's like, go up to it and be like, worst case scenario, that happens. What will I do? And that actually flips something into your brain that brings it, I think, more into the logical center where humans are problem solvers. And so if there's something lingering that is driving, like it's the same fear or scenario that you just can't understand what it's really about, it's like, walk through it. And that can be a really scary thing, but it's like, oftentimes we get to the end of this hypothetical fear or something that's driving us, and it's like, well, I would have a plan. if that happens. Or it takes the fear, it takes the
Right.
sting, it takes that sort of fogginess and that uncertainty out of it. I think it's that same kind of almost diamond process, but it's more like in a logical sense. So if you're doing these movement things, you're changing environments, but let's say you kind of come back down and it's still with you. Again, I'm going to link the show. I would really encourage you to listen to it if you find yourself being someone that falls in that category, and then going through this process of walking through your anxious feeling, bringing it into the logical mind and trying to problem solve for it, and like being real with yourself of what that would look like. And I'm going to stop rambling, but I am testing that in my own. I'm not going to lie. This past weekend, I tried to do that a little bit, and like it helped a little, but the edge was still there because the edge was hormonal. I'm going to be real. Like it couldn't
Yeah.
bring down my progesterone. So we were sad a lot, many cries, many a cry, but each cry helped a little bit. It did.
I think there's a lot to be said about identifying what is causing the anxiety. And I think that that's something we definitely could like delve into further, but I don't know that we have like a ton of time for it. A lot of the times when I was just thinking like basic anxiety, a lot of times I'm thinking of like no cause, like no firm cause. I'm just like, you're starting to kind of get anxious. But I think there's a whole nother ball game to I'm anxious because of these specific situations I'm concerned about. And it reduces the power that that negative situation has over you when you're able to think through that worst case scenario.
Yeah,
However,
exactly.
like the only problem with that is there are going to be people who have an unhealthy way of processing through the worst case scenario. Like they're always thinking worst case scenario. And in that situation, I'm not really sure what you should do. So if you have a catastrophizing personality,
Yeah, that's a
I
good
wonder
point.
if that would be just like feeding that catastrophizing part of yourself, or if it would be taking your power back, thinking, okay, this person is mad at me and I'm really anxious about what they're going to do when they stay mad at me or whatever. And then you're able to kind of process through, well, the worst thing they can do is tell me that they're angry. And then we can talk about it, which in the end is probably for the better. And then that gives you your power back. And I think that's great. I do wonder if that is advice that can apply to everybody, or if there are certain people who need to almost avoid it.
Yeah, especially, yeah, if you have a catastrophizing sort of personality, or I would imagine any sort of anxiety that has followed trauma, or, where it's, yeah, maybe you don't have a reference point of how the end result is going to be okay. I appreciate you putting that in perspective because I think it's a really interesting thing that piqued my curiosity and I want to try. But as I said, it didn't necessarily help me get completely out of my state this past weekend. So I feel like the other things that I did that were more helpful helped take me from future projections or looking back into the moment and just being like, my reality is here right now. And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about is doing, is just kind of resetting that and almost like taking you out of your brain for a while, because that's where all of this
Yeah.
lives.
I think the reality is that anxiety is such like a complicated part
Yeah.
of existing that they're all true. Like there are all these different methods that are going to like work and counteract, like how we kind of talked about, like we really need to get our bodies moving, but somebody might need to be getting their body to like still. Because I can even think of, especially like I see a lot of times with moms, they're overactive when it comes to certain things, when they're like stressed out and then they're just like cleaning. And for some people cleaning can be soothing and that's great, but for some people like they just need to sit down, they need to like take a second to exist. And so it is interesting that everything we talked about, I'm sure, could be flipped over. And you're I think back even to like the food thing. Someone can take that too far. Someone can be like, well, I can't have any caffeine at all, which might be important for someone to have no caffeine. But then they might cut other things out. Like, well, I can't have any sugar, or I can't have any fat, or, I think that's kind of whenever we're talking about this stuff that involves the brain, there is always going to be another side and a caveat where this doesn't work. And I do feel like I am a person who I like constantly think about who that's not going to work for, which is not always helpful. So I'm sorry to all of you who constantly listen to me be like, well, this is for everyone except for all these scenarios.
Oh, we do that all the time.
Read all of
That
that
this is
background.
Yeah. You know what? If they haven't liked it at this point, you guys probably aren't listening anymore. Because I do that too. All the time in this podcast. When I talk to people, I'm like, I probably don't sound confident, but I'm just trying to look at it from every angle. So
I really thought about it.
Yeah, is it an anxiety response? Maybe. I don't know. But that triggered something I really, really wanted to also remember to say is that, well, a couple things. Trial and error. Any good thing in life is trial and error. Try it. Keep notes. Keep a lot. I was just talking to my sister who's actually in the mental health space too. Keep written notes about what you're going through or exactly what you felt. Mine was in relation to my cycle specifically, but even if you're like, well, I don't know how I feel, it's this like in the moment, write it. And it doesn't have to be journaling. I'm not saying journal all you're feeling. Bullet point, like this is my fear, or like what are words you would describe it, and try to find patterns. So that's one. Gather your own data. Trial and error. You might listen to us, and if you feel strongly, I know we've said this before, that you're like, that doesn't work for me, I need the opposite. Cool. Follow that. Like, listen to what resonates and then what you actually push back on. And the thing I really want to end on saying is, if you are at the point where you're like, should I maybe get help? Get help.
Yeah.
There's no threshold that is the same for everyone. It's like, well, I only feel like if that question is in your brain, like, and I mean, if seeking professional help. Like if you at any point are like, maybe, yes. Yes. It doesn't have to be a certain point or you're not like, trust that question.
Yeah. I think that's actually so important. And I'm so thankful that you said that, because I don't want anything I said to encourage people to wait. You should never wait till it gets bad enough, quotation marks. If you're thinking about getting help and maybe talking to a therapist or talking to your doctor, then you should. And that is awesome, and I'm proud of you. And I like, full disclosure, as I talk through all of these tools I'm using, I have been in and out of therapy in my entire adulthood. I did a few years in college. I'm only on a break from it right now because my therapist had a baby, but I've definitely been doing it for the past year. I think that's an incredibly important like subsection to dealing with anxiety. But I also want to separate the fact that some people have an anxiety disorder, but we all have anxiety. And I don't know how to parse that out. If you're starting to really be concerned or even think about it, Brooke is right.
Yeah, and that's well said too, because one thing that comes to mind is like, as another person who's been in and out of therapy her whole life, these are tools that you have to use alongside therapy or, any route that you choose to take. So yes, therapy can benefit the people even without a diagnosed anxiety disorder. Just know that. So I think we're providing these because it's like, this is what you might be taught in therapy or this, but that doesn't mean that it's the end all be all. And they're sometimes just that interaction with a person who can look at you and has that background knowledge and is going to help you see your blind spots. That might be the missing piece if you're like, I do all of this and I still feel this way. Also, newsflash, it's never going to go away. It's never going to totally fix it. We're in a world full of anxiety, as you said. It's an epidemic. But if you were like, I actually can't handle this by myself anymore, should I seek help? Yeah, you should. It has taken me from my lowest lows, which, fun fact, I feel like I've shared this story. I was like, I'm depressed. I'm so depressed. I start working with my therapist, and she's like, so your anxiety? And I was like, no. It's depression. And she's like, oh, no. And I was like, what? And even that was like... We need these people. It's good. Take advantage of resources if you can.
Yeah, it's absolutely an important piece to the puzzle that is existing.
Yeah. But thanks for hanging out with us on this conversation if you made it this far. As always, we love to get your comments, follow up, and just know that, again, we're rooting for you wherever you're at. And wherever you're starting with this, just remember, people love you, you're capable, and you are not alone in your anxiety. You are not. Even the people that look like they have it all together and like, oh, I want to be like that person, they're so happy, they probably also have anxiety.
I mean, what would be being human without it?
I know, like it's the it thing.
Yeah.
With that, we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.